Born Primitive Outdoor is proud to partner with Montana Knife Company, Marsupial Gear, Evolution Outdoors, Sheep Feet, and Capture Gear. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks to our sponsors. What's up, everyone? It's Monday morning. Welcome back to the Born Primitive Outdoor podcast. I was actually supposed to be flying today to the Born Primitive World headquarters, which is in Virginia Beach, but my flight got all screwed up, so I'm flying tomorrow. But that was good because we recently did a podcast with a couple buddies, my buddy Wally and Ty, and Wally had been faced guiding with some different situations that put him in bad positions. Just go listen to the podcast. It's lessons learned type of a podcast that we just did. But I got a ton of response from that. And because of that, I brought my right-hand man, Kurt Gamache, on the podcast. Kurt, thank you for coming on again.
Yeah, Aaron, thanks, man. I think we're taking advantage of some of the issues with airline travel right now, and we're going to kind of knock out this quick podcast, going over, like you said, some of the scenario from Wally's podcast previously, some lessons learned. I know he dove into a good bit of that there, but we're just going to kind of unpack that and break it down a little bit more in this one. And, you know, for those of you who don't know me, Kurt Gamache, been with Born Primitive Outdoor for almost 3 years now, working with Aron pretty closely in all aspects of the outdoor and hunting industry. I primarily just do like RDT&E and product development with all of the gear that you guys are probably familiar with. And I spend a significant portion of my time in the backcountry or hunting, teaching some of the academy courses and spending time with Aron. So that's a little bit of my background. And the fact that I was also 20-year retired military and special operations. So that's kind of who the fuck I am and why you should listen to me.
Yeah.
And real quick, I just want to touch, before we dive in, like I want to make it clear, we're going to be talking about this other podcast. We're not blaming anybody. We're not pointing fingers. Like in the backcountry, in any scenario, mistakes happen. And I've seen it in even the most experienced operators in the world and most experienced guides. Shit happens. And what matters the most is learning from that experience and sharing it with other people so that potentially you could stop them from making the same mistake in the future.
Yeah, 100%. Actually, and this is not a plug. I'm not paid from anyone when I say this, but everybody, I suggest to listen to the book Deep Survival. It'll touch on a lot of the stuff that, and I don't know if Kurt's actually listened to that or not, but great audiobook. If you listen to this and you got like a mountain erection and you're wanting to think more about survival, listen to that book. There's many others, and we'll touch on some of those as we go through. But as Kurt said, we're going to be, covering some of the things, recapping, and that's mostly the responses I got were a lot of survival kind of stories from people, from flipping four-wheelers to weather, breaking bones. Other people, just great podcast. And then some asking more in-depth questions or wanting, us to go over things in a little bit more depth. And then obviously people had asked about the Born Primitive Academy, if we're going to be having those to touch on all of these things that we'll be talking about today. So, having said that, the first thing would be the 5-point, that's what we called it in the Army, the 5-point contingency plan, and explaining that in a little bit more depth, and then also putting you guys verbally into some scenarios where that comes into play or how it can screw you by not applying that. So Kurt, I'll let you take it from here. Kurt, his job in the military required a very high level anal retentiveness and planning and things like that. So he's much better at this stuff than I am, but go ahead, Kurt.
Yeah, thanks, man. So what Aron knows is a 5-point contingency plan. I know it as GOTWA. They're kind of synonymous in how I use it. It's an acronym, GOTWA. And it's like one of the simplest and most powerful tools that I use in the backcountry. A lot of the stuff that I learned in the military directly translates to hunting, spending time in the outdoors in general, especially in multi-day overnight scenarios. So what this acronym does is it just keeps you organized, it reduces the risk, and it lets other people know what's happening within that scenario. You can do this in the beginning, you can do it during, and it's just you just kind of keep it going based on how the scenario plays out, because what you might have planned for initially, contingencies happen. You just want to kind of keep refreshing this and keeping people up to date, all the way from, letting your family know where you're going, how long and all of that prior to even stepping out the door, to you're on site at the top of a mountain and you're leaving camp and telling your buddy, hey, I'm just going to grab some water. That way everybody has information and can make the best decisions from there. So breaking it down, the G is going. And this is like, know exactly where you're going. So whether that's using Onyx or a GPS or some other navigational aid, mapping compass, however you're doing it when you're out there, what direction that is, and being able to communicate that with the route based on drainage, elevation, and all of that, and passing the word. So you can talk about this in a specific scenario. I'm going hunting, and hey, I'm just letting my family know, hey, I'm going to northern Idaho. Here's where I'll be. This is where my base camp's going to be set up. I'll be in communication with you via these means, and this is how long. And this is what is going to break down into the rest of the acronym here. So we covered G really quick. O is others. This is account for like every person that's with you. Not only how many people you have, but their experience level, their fitness level, what's their cold weather tolerance, if they have any sort of experience like this in the past. This is especially important with clients, because oftentimes they lean pretty heavily on their guides for a majority of the experience. They will show up relatively with very few very little knowledge of what to do in some of these stressful situations, and they kind of really rely on the guide for that and the decision-making process. So, and it was pointed out in the previous podcast, it doesn't matter how badass you are. If you're out there with a bunch of people, the one struggling person can slow down the whole group and increase risk for everybody else. So being able to have contingencies in place for that weakest link in your group is pretty important. The next one is time, basically setting hard turnaround times based on daylight, weather, whatever contingencies start happening. And this is like, deciding when to stop. It can save a life. Like getting ego out of it, having a drop dead time based on realistic scenarios that's not ego driven is going to be the number one thing that you can do, because you can find yourself getting into some cascading failures that could ultimately lead to you or the person that you're with not coming out of that alive. The W is a what if. This is covering basically all the contingency plans, knowing where you'd shelter if you got stuck out there, how to signal for help, what each person should do if someone gets separated or injured, and just all of these like medical contingency plans is covered under what if. And the last one is A for actions on. This could be, in a military settings, actions on during contact or whatever, but this is really what to do when something goes wrong, whether that's hypothermia, injury, navigation error, and now you're lost. And then everyone should know like how these should know these steps and basically how to prevent them, so you're not panicking in these situations when something happens. So that's pretty much the breakdown of GOTWA. It's military jargon. It's just essentially a structured line of thinking to keep it simple for you, that you can constantly use to reevaluate the situation as stuff starts changing. It takes like 5 minutes to go through, and as you start doing this, it just becomes second nature, and you're covering down on all of these things basically constantly. If you've ever heard of the OODA loop, it's kind of similar to that. Observe, orient, decide, act. It's like you're just constantly in this loop, this cycle of thinking and planning and acting and reacting to give yourself the best sort of opportunity should something happen.
And putting a little bit more, people do 5 points every day and they don't know, or partial 5 points, meaning you could run to the store and give a 5 point, or the beginning of one, meaning, hey, I'm going to run to the store with Dale. And when I say run to the store, should be back in the next half an hour. We might swing by Ace Hardware, grab what, you're just giving info. So Where this you come into problems in the backcountry with this, or from what I've seen, is I'm just going to use people that you know. So it's me and Jerry Shaw, Kurt, Wally, and Ty. And Kurt and I break off from Wally, Ty, and Jerry. And Kurt and I are going to do a massive loop that day. And those three are going to kind of hang out where we're breaking away from them. But our base camp of like where we set up, right, or where all our tents are, is about 2 miles from there. And generally, like when we go away, it's going to be, all right, Kurt and I are going to head over to Silvertip Basin. It's a 3 miles from here. If there's nothing in there, we're going to loop around and we're going to hit this other basin and just kind of hunt our way around. If we don't get into anything, we'll meet you guys back here around 6 o'clock. If we're not back here by 6 o'clock, you guys head back to the tents because we may take another route. And then on that, I'll also say, all right, who's got in reaches? Okay, let's make sure. And I've gotten a lot better at this later in life. Let's do a test run, make sure everybody's shit works, right? Let's make sure we got, and then, okay, we're good. And then sometimes if it's a really tight-knit group, I will ask like, all right, hey, who's all got food for the day? All right, you guys got Nalgene's, everybody's got purification, like whatever, just to make sure everybody's solid. And then I'll say again, if we're not back here by 6, you guys go back to base camp. And if we're not to base camp by 10 o'clock tonight and you have not heard from us, something's wrong, because we just tested it. We've got good comms. Everything's working. If we're not back by 10, you guys start looking. This is the route we're going to be taking. And or concern, like, maybe wait till the next morning before you look. But in the next morning, things can happen. And I mean, this is like legit. I mean, hey, hunt your way back to the route we were planning to come in on and look for us, right? We may have a big bull down. We could have run out of batteries. And the thing with this is that scenario, especially if I have somebody like Kurt with me or I'm with Kurt, we're very much prepared to stay overnight. And it's really probably not that big of a deal unless something major happens or a weather comes in. And the 3 people that we left are going to be basing on what they do off of those things, because we have the plan, right? And so, meaning if a giant blizzard comes in, they don't want to go out in that blizzard and look because they could cause danger, but they might get a hold of somebody and say, hey, look, you guys get ready. Like, you may need to come up here. We can't get a hold of Kurt and Aron. And again, and you can add to this, those are the kind of things that happen, even as far as keys. Hey, we're hunting our way back by or whatever. Somebody's got a bull down. We're going this way, and, Wally's going to head back to the truck, and he's going to run into town. He's going to hike out 5 miles. He's going to grab whatever, making sure he has the keys, what time he should be back to camp. There's a lot of scenarios you can go over, but the key thing's huge. As stupid as that sounds, I don't know how many guys I know hike back to the truck don't have keys. So just a plan, which isn't necessarily part of a 5-point, but it also kind of is, right? Kurt, take it from there if you want.
No, I mean, you're pretty solid there. And just constantly updating too. Like, if you're running an in-reach and your buddies who are back at camp are doing the same, just being sure to like periodically check in with them, because it's a setting you can add, but every time you send that message to them, it's going to update them with where your location is. So the more often you communicate with them as you're, doing this 12-hour circle or loop around on your hunt, the more often they're going to be notified of where exactly you are. So if something does go wrong, they have a better idea of where to start, or they can get an eyes on, if you changed your plan up, they can kind of communicate that. You can communicate that with them, and then they can adjust based on all that. But I know, Aron, you spend a lot of time up in BC, and up there, like, it's pretty austere. You're getting bush planed in, and you are in the middle of nowhere for an extended period of time. So I know you've communicated with me on a number of occasions that you have very specific drop dead times, which is essentially, if no matter what we're doing, how close we are to getting a kill on an animal, like if we reach this threshold, like we have to just stop whatever we're doing and head back. Otherwise we could run into those scenarios where we're having those cascading failures of just contingencies upon contingencies that like you're not prepared to deal with, because the majority of your gear and survival equipment is back at camp, and you just have a very minimal amount of stuff. Could you kind of talk about what that is, how you analyze that, and if that changes based on the client you're with, or is it like fixed for everybody?
No, I mean, it changes on different things. I mean, one, it really depends on where I'm at, right? And I say that's geographically, not where I'm at, where I'm hunting, but meaning, is it extremely a cliffy area? Is it an area that weather's really bad? Do I have people that can come help? And the reason why there's such, very hard lines in northern BC is there is potentially no one coming to get you. And specifically, the plane can only land in a few different spots, right? So maybe they could fly in, but they're flying in 9 miles from you, right? So again, there's a lot to it, but I take, and you brought it up a second ago, one is how much gear, do you have all your gear on you? If you have all your bivy gear, meaning your sleeping bag and your tent and everything else, well, then it's kind of a moot point. Doesn't matter. We got everything we need. But depending upon the distance we are away from camp, that is where my first timeline comes into play. So if we're a mile from camp, that timeline might shift right or left, depending, meaning I might be saying, okay, we don't shoot anything past 7 o'clock because the camp is, knowing that it gets dark at 11 o'clock at night, it stays pretty light up there. That might shift one way or another if we're closer to camp or if the terrain is easier. But all those timelines are figured out based on what kind of fitness level everyone is at in the group. That's client, packer, guide, everyone. How far we are from camp, like I said, what terrain I'm looking at to get back, and what the weather is as well. That's what I figure that timeline off of. And I also, when you're figuring out that timeline, you also need to know how fast is it, what's the speed that you have to do a full body cape on a stone sheep or a mountain goat. How long does it take you to cape it? One, photos. Everybody wants photos. 2, cape it, debone it, get it in the pack. How long does that take? So you need to know that to base these timelines, because that's part of the game, right? If it takes you an hour just to cape an animal, full body cape or shoulder mount, and then it takes you another 45 minutes plus another 20 in photos, right? So 2 hours and change, rounded up 2:15, and being safe, let's say 2.5 hours from the time you get to the animal, to the time that you're moving out. All of those things come into play. And that is where I try not to push that ever, and I've pushed it and I've gotten into trouble from pushing it, meaning, the client physical fitness level, we're in cliffs, he's giving up, it's dark now, he didn't bring a headlamp. Those are all huge. And that's another thing, on those timelines, that's another thing that kind of comes into play is, the gear that everyone has on them, in case or in the knowledge they have for putting yourself in a bad position. Meaning, if Kurt came up and he was a client, or Wally, I'd probably push all those limits pretty far, because I know the capabilities of what you guys have. I know the gear that you would have on you, and I know the physical fitness level of where we're at. So it shifts, right? But I would say, as it shifts, when in doubt, err to the side of caution. But it's different when you have a bunch of, I don't know what you want to call hitters, right? It's different. But when you have a client, right, your jobs anyway, as a guide, you have to keep safety, happy, animal down, right? Just pretty basic stuff. When you're with buddies, it's a little bit different when they're long time friendship, and what everybody's capable of. All of those things come into play.
Yeah. No, and this is, again, the main thing to take away from that is it's not just the static thing like, hey, it takes me an hour to get back, I'm just going to make sure that I'm done with whatever I'm doing at 6 o'clock, and then that's it, we're going back. Like, you have to constantly reevaluate and assess, nod to you, Lance Banning, what's going on here, so that you can change the plan based on the contingency. So like you said, all of this is great, but if you're with a bunch of hitters, but most of them are out of water, you didn't bring enough food for that day, and you're running on fumes with that. You're dehydrated. You got a little bit of hypothermia. Like all of these factors are going to play into adjusting or shifting your priorities in order to kind of change up that timeline that you had maybe originally set. So
and
you're going through this loop constantly, this GOTWA planning strategy constantly, and just reevaluating.
Yeah, and Lance Banning, he had helped me out up in BC. Lance is a former SF dude, and it was kind of a joke because he said something to me at some point about, as long as you're assessing. And I was like, Lance, if you say assessing to me again, I will slap the shit out of you. He and I are very good friends. We fuck with each other constantly. You could film it, right? We constantly jacking with each other. But what Lance said is 100% correct. And what Kurt said is the biggest thing is constantly be adjusting your plan and thinking, right, of what's going on, what's happening, weather, changing, whatever, right? You have to be looking at that all the time. And, above and beyond that, with everything we're talking about is the gear that you have on you and the knowledge of use of the gear that you have. And when I say that, I firmly believe there is I say firmly, there's no doubt about it. There's a set amount of gear you should have on you all the time. Yeah. And it doesn't matter, anywhere. And that gear needs to be not only on you, you also need to be very confident in using it, right? And understanding it and everything else. So everybody is kind of on the same page with the group that you have. And that's where clients kind of deviate that, meaning, with a client, you got to kind of level up to the lowest denominator. And sometimes that is the client. So as far as gear goes, and Kurt, you take it from here, and then I'll take it from Kurt. Kurt, what do you have on you no matter what, and what might you add depending upon certain situations? Yeah.
And I'll kind of give a little bit of a long-winded answer with this because it's a little bit more involved than just the gear. My mentality around this is, my one question that I ask myself all the time is, how much is your life worth? And for some people, they ask themselves that question and they're like, well, I'm going to make sure I buy the best damn gear, the most expensive gear on the market that does everything that I need it to do. And then in a way that's going to directly correlate with my ability to stay alive, kill an animal, or survive in an austere environment. My mentality is, how much is your life worth, specifically with getting yourself knowledge, because gear itself isn't going to save your life. The knowledge is what's going to save you. You can be put in some pretty terrible situations, and that podcast with Wally is a very strong testament to this, where they made a lot of terrible decisions, but they had the training and the knowledge to fall back on to get themselves out alive. If there were many other people stuck in the situation that they were in, they would have definitely been a few more dead bodies at the top of a mountain in a snowstorm. So I will always lean, and if anybody asks me, hey, I've got $500 to my name right now, and I need to get some gear for this hunt that's coming up. What should I get? I'm always going to talk them out of getting gear that they probably don't need and get them to get into some training that could actually save them lives and or save their lives. And it's something as simple as medical training. They could go through land navigation course and just getting some awareness in that. Now, gear absolutely does help, but at the same time, if you look back at history, people have been getting away with doing some pretty ridiculous shit with some low tech gear. And
having
is a huge part of that.
I just interrupt real quick. The deep survival books, just because in reverse, there's also people with in absolute reverse situations with the highest level of gear that don't get away with those situations. Meaning, and that book goes into that. And again, I think everybody should listen to that. But go ahead.
Was that deep survival that you were talking about?
Yeah, and it goes into it at a physiological, brain, it's crazy level of what makes someone decide to make a bad decision. But I agree with Kurt wholeheartedly on this. But go ahead.
Yeah, so with that disclaimer out, now I think it's probably appropriate to get into gear. So layering in the backcountry, especially in, cold, wet, snowy environments, is actually absolutely crucial. So, and the biggest thing is staying warm and dry. It's gonna make or break you in there. And I don't know how. Maybe we just go into like the layering system right now and talk about basic layering, and then instead of specific gear, or do you want to just cover what do I always carry on me at all times?
Let's break it down piece by piece, from layering system to possibles pouch to kind
Perfect.
of one at a time.
Yeah. I mean, we could go over like, hey, just what do I do? But honestly, that doesn't help somebody who maybe needs to do something else. So I think that's probably a better call. So it's gonna start with your base layer. So that layer that is basically next to skin is your moisture management layer. So for me, I will always tend to gravitate toward a merino wool or some sort of merino poly blend. The benefit with that is, wool by itself will retain like about 80% of its thermal properties when it's wet, but it also is susceptible to holding in moisture. It dries slower. Whereas with some of the synthetic poly blends, you have a little bit better. It has probably a bit worse thermal retention properties, but it does dry faster, and it just kind of performs a little bit better. It doesn't stretch too much, whereas wool will kind of stretch and just start sagging, not fitting that well. So I tend to get a merino poly blend for my base layers, and it's going to be, again, based on the environment. Different weights or thicknesses of that fabric are going to play a key, whether I go with a very lightweight one, or if I'm in a cold weather scenario, I'm going to go with a heavier, like 240 GSM weight merino base layer. And the whole purpose of that layer, again, it pulls sweat away from your skin. I would avoid cotton in most cases here. Now there is that, adage that gets thrown around, cotton kills. And yeah, depending on the situation, I would say yes. But at the same time, cotton is very good for evaporative cooling. So, you could also use cotton to its benefit. So it just depends on the situation. Again, you have to know the gear that you have and how to use it appropriately. But in general, just avoid cotton unless you know what you're doing with layering. Anything you want to add on for base layers, Aaron?
Just a little bit, and it's just what you just said. It just boils down to, is it hot as hell or cold as shit, right? So cold as shit, I wear, in the case of like Born Primitive, a Ridgeline heavy for my base layer when extremely cold. When it's moderately cold, I wear the Ridgeline light. When it's just like whatever, sometimes I'll just wear a cotton poly t-shirt, right? I mean, it's highly depends on what you're doing, and it comes more and more important as the conditions get shittier and shittier. But the base layer being merino or a merino blend, not just because, for me, not just because of the heat retention value when it's wet, it doesn't stink, right? It takes a long time, for it to smell bad. And if you wear synthetic for even a day or two, you'll smell so bad. And it'll
get funky.
It gets funky. And I've never had this happen, but if you familiar with a yeast infection, I've seen dudes get some funky shit happen in their armpits and their crotch beside their twig and berries from wearing synthetic for too long or cotton for too long. So again, it really just depends, length of stay, weather, everything else.
Yeah. And everybody has their own preference. There are people who just prefer synthetic base layers. We have some grid fleece synthetic base layers that we have available with Born Primitive Outdoor for the guys who prefer that. And then we have the merino stuff as well. So it's just, pick your poison there with that.
I would say though, when in doubt, if you're wondering, get a merino blend base layer. Like when in doubt,
buy once, cry once, just get the merino.
Yep.
Yeah. Next one up is mid layer. And this is kind of like a lighter weight insulation layer. This is going to be where your fleece stands. You're going to have some wool that kind of fall into this as well. And even some lightweight synthetic puffies could fall into this. The purpose of this layer is basically to just trap body heat. With all of these layering systems, the goal is body temperature regulation. So, with that mid layer, you want to be able to adjust it, because you're going to be wearing this typically as you're moving out, high levels of exertion. So you want to be able to look for something that has like a full zip or a half zip, so you can kind of vent appropriately without having to don and doff layers constantly as you're moving out. Born Primitive Outdoor specifically, we have the Quiver grid fleece. It's got a half zip. We got a full zip grid fleece as well. These are kind of, I would say, the layering. Well, I just fucked that up. I would say the mid layer is probably the one that I spend the most time in, because I'll typically not wear base layers if I'm starting out the hunt or the hike, because I tend to get pretty hot as I'm moving out, especially if I'm heading to a camp and I've got 60 pounds on my back. I'm not wanting to sweat too much, and I typically will keep the base layers off for times when I'm not as heavy and not moving around as much. And that's kind of where my mid layers fall into as well.
Yeah, I agree. And when you're looking at this, I don't see any issue with doing a mid layer in synthetic or merino. And I think where that comes into play is, again, everything we've already talked about, what type of hunt you're about to go on, backpacking trip. And so when I say that, the more extreme you get, or when I say that, colder weather, things like that, that's where you look at, okay, I generally never make a secondary layer or intermediate layer in merino when it's moderate conditions. I wear grid fleece and our Quiver hoodie. When the weather gets bad, I'm catering towards the thicker merino for my secondary or mid layer. And people ask that and like, why? And it's pretty hard to beat. And don't get me wrong, I love synthetic too, but as as you're shifting towards the shitty side, meaning end of October into November, the heat retention value of your garments that you're wearing become more and more important, because just simple temperature drops, right? The temperature is getting colder and colder, and you can get away with a lot more when it's early. And that, people, I'm not busting on YouTube pages and social, but if nobody's ever hunted in the high country end of October, November, it's a different world than the beginning of September. When I say a different world, it is a different animal altogether. And so the conditions that I'm facing, I mean, honestly, like when you get into that heavy snow, 10,000 feet, I'll wear a very thick intermediate layer, that's a, merino blend, just because I'm in that thing all the time, right? I am not layering up and down as much because it's so freaking cold. I'm in it all the time. So just things to think about.
Yeah. And again, the base layers, they're not mutually exclusive. Like if you're in a cold weather, you're not just only going to wear the heavyweight 240 Ridgeline base layer. You can stack the 160s with the 240s. You can put the 240s and a grid fleece base layer over top. So it's like this whole layering system is vital. And it's going to depend on your budget. It's going to depend on what you currently have available and actually what you packed with you. So stacking these as much as possible based on the environment you're in and how mobile you are is going to be kind of the most important part. So moving on to the next one is the outer layer. This is, at least with Born Primitive, what we kind of have as our frontier pants fall into this. All of our puff jackets fall into this. We even have a micro grid fleece that falls into this. So the outer layer is, supposed to be more breathable, but give you a bit more insulative value, a little bit of protection from wind, snow, rain, all the environmentals, but also allow you to have kind of full range of motion and the ability to move if necessary, is something that would fall into the outer layer.
Yeah. And when you look at, outer layers, and this is with anything, so is a puffy an outer layer? And I get asked that all the time. And to me, it can be an outer layer, but it also can be, basically your third layer, and your fourth is your outer. And it just depends. I mean, I think for the most part, people should have a puffy jacket with them all the time, whether it's a lightweight or a heavyweight puffy. You should always have one in your pack. And that's just because they're handy, right? I mean, I'm not a big fan of down puffy jackets unless it's extreme cold weather, just because when they get wet, they're kind of worthless. But, for me, if you're looking at, relatively cold weather, I've got a lightweight base layer, and then I've got that's usually a merino blend, or pretty much always merino blend. And then I may have another merino layer or a synthetic layer over that. Then I have a puffy, and then I either have rain gear or something like the headwind fleece. And that again is just going to depend on the weather that I'm dealing with. And so, having said all that, everyone should have a puffy, whether they consider it an outer layer or the upper echelon intermediate layer, because another layer may be going over the top of that, like rain gear. So
yeah, totally agree. And I'm glad you touched on down versus synthetic. That is going to be constantly debated throughout the future, and it's been debated recently and in the past more times than I can count. And it all comes down to what's more important to you: packability and weight versus versatility is kind of how and if I'm going to only carry one thing, I can adjust my fitness level to carry what I need to carry. I'd rather have a puff jacket that is synthetic, that is a little bit larger when it packs down, but is going to survive any of those contingencies that I'm going to run into. Like, I look at a down jacket that I can't trust myself to be in a scenario where I'm going to 100% guarantee that this thing is not going to get wet, because you never fucking know what happens when you get out in the backcountry. Even on a hike, like, I would always default to the piece of kit that is going to give me the most versatility in its function than something that is very specific, that in certain instances works a lot better than synthetic. But I can't guarantee that it's going to work in most environments. And this kind of comes down to another one of my rules that I have for myself, on top of like, how much is your life worth, prioritizing training over gear. This is another one. It's like, when I'm choosing a particular product or item to go into my kit, I subscribe to the 70% solution that works 100% of the time versus that 100% of the solution that works 70% of the time. And what that means is why I would choose a synthetic puff jacket over a down is because while it's not the most optimal in a perfect condition with thermal properties and insulation retention and all of that, I know that will work in 100% of the environment, because if it gets wet, it's still going to keep me warm, versus something that's a little bit more dialed in. Yeah. And we use this with tactics, because it's like, in a house, there's this 100% way to clear a building that you're going to cover all your angles and protect your buddy's back. But it's honestly like, that only fits typically in that one little scenario. And if you transition to a cave clearance, or you transition to a high-rise building, or a smaller structure, like, that specific clearance method isn't going to work, and you're not going to remember it because it's too specific. That's why it's like, tactics are generally like a 70% solution that work in 100% of the environments, because they're easy, they're constant, they're easy to replicate. The team knows what you're doing, and that's kind of what I use to fuel how I choose products as well. It's like, it doesn't need to do that one thing really good. It needs to do everything pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, a Bic lighter is a good example. Like, I take a Bic lighter everywhere, but that fucker gets wet. It's not good. And I've transitioned from that, meaning, I don't rely on a Bic lighter nearly as much as I always have one on me as I do now.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty easy. You can soak a Bic lighter in a bucket of water and, for say an hour, and pull it out, and you can get it dry to where it'll ignite. It's just, you have to know what you're doing. And then again, that's part of that contingency, like, stress test that prior to that shit actually happening in real world. Just throw it in a bucket of water and come back an hour later and practice getting it dry and letting it. Like, it's possible. You just need to know what you're doing.
Well, and I mean, with that, having said that, rather than having to fuck with it for 30 to 45 minutes to get it dry, would having 6...
No, dude, it's like 10 to 15 seconds, maybe even less.
Yeah, okay, so a good example, I have not been able to get a Bic lighter personally dry and usable in 15 to 30 seconds because even if I could, I just grab my giant dongle waterproof matches because I'm like, fuck that Bic, and use one of those.
Yeah, and strike it.
That goes to, you should learn how to dry that Bic lighter out. I mean, all of these things are important. Or learn to use a ferro rod and have a smaller, ferro rod. But how many people do you see with those wristband ferro rod bracelets or necklaces that look literally, they've never been touched, right? So it's just a fashion statement at that point. And honestly, like, I had one for a little bit because I actually know how to use a ferro rod pretty well. But even then, once I took that off my neck and I was trying to it's just so small, you can't really get a good grip on it. It's a fucking pain in the ass. Like, why wouldn't I just carry a ferro rod in my pocket? No, that's where I got, because I had one and it was like a hot dog in a hallway, right? I'm like trying to start a fire with this tiny little necklace. My hands are freezing.
And then your striker is scraping the skin off your finger and you're just getting pissed off.
Well, and by that time, if I needed that, I can't feel my fingers anyway to hold that tiny little striker. So those are the things where I really want people to try it out, because probably you're carrying a bunch of shit you don't need, nor do you know how to use, or when you need to use it, the situation that you're in makes it unusable. So, whatever. But I think that's all good. Touching on what Kurt, I am not a fan of down for anything except extreme Arctic type, adventures where I know getting it wet is really a moot point because it never gets above 5 degrees or whatever else. For, I would say, 95% of the planet, especially in the hunting world, synthetic is going to be a better option, throughout. And it's not that much difference in weight and packability. It's a little bit. So, food for thought. I know they have hydrophobic down and everything else, but it still gets wet. So, for me, I just don't run down ever, except in a sleeping bag.
Yeah. And I'm the same way. And moving on, the last layer, at least for our layering system, is what we refer to as a shell. And this is going to be like a hard shell, your waterproof, your windproof layers. And I know you touched on it with using your rain gear and putting a puff gear underneath it and using it as a layering system like that. But the shell is going to be what's going to keep those extreme elements off of you. Now, it doesn't have to be a rain jacket and rain pant. It could be a poncho. It could be, your tarp system. So shell is going to be the last layer. So just recapping, we got base layer, mid layer, outer layer, and then shell. Anything to add with the shell?
Yeah, I mean, the shell is in. This is really, I just about said MET-T dependent, but this is really depending upon where I'm at, and again, all of the different variables of this. I may personally have 2 shells, and when I say that, I may have our rain gear. When I say ours, we have a 4-way stretch rain gear. I may have that rain gear, and I may also have the headwind fleece. I may shift those things around. I always believe you should have rain gear with you, but sometimes I will have both, and it really just depends on what I'm, looking at and what I'm doing. Very rarely am I ever going to leave rain gear at home to take a headwind fleece, but a lot of times I may take both. And, people have asked me about that, and I'm like, okay, well, you can shift things around a little bit, meaning rather than running a, let's say, 150 or a lightweight merino and then a heavyweight merino, or a lightweight merino and then a grid fleece, I may drop one of those out to take the headwind fleece, and I can put the puffy jacket under that and the rain gear over the headwind. And it really just depends on each person, time of year, weather, everything else, on what you want to do. The biggest thing is you don't want to sweat to death. That's why there is a layering system, and that's just going to depend on what we talked about.
Yeah. Cool. We can kind of carry on into that because that really just covers the apparel aspect with those 4 different layering systems. And now we can kind of, cover extremities, hands, head, feet, and then what to look for with those, because you can layer those the exact same way. You got, basically base layer, merino wool gloves. Then you can have thicker fleece gloves. You have basically an insulated shell that you can put over top of that. Same with your head, wool and synthetic beanies. And then feet, I always default to wool socks, different thicknesses. Sometimes I'll bring lighter weight wool hiking sock when I'm going out, because I know I'm going to be moving out. My feet will sweat a little bit. It'll keep me warm enough. And then when I get to camp, I'll always have extra set of dry socks, maybe a little bit heavier weight that I'll swap out and put those on. And making sure to keep those in dry bags and everything when you're in your bag. So anything to touch on with some of those extremity layering systems that you would prefer?
Yeah, and I've seen some pretty well-known people talk about, and I'm just going to talk about a beanie hat or a toque or whatever people want to call it. I am a big fan of medium to relatively lightweight beanie hats on all hunts, and that doesn't mean I may not have a thicker type of insulating layer on my head, but there's for me, there's days that I can wear a ball cap or nothing at all and just throw the hood of my quiver fleece on, or the headwind fleece or whatever, or the headwind jacket, and just throw that on. The problem that I have with, only running one really thick beanie, and that's what I've seen people talk about. I don't know why anybody carries a lightweight, beanie hat, just carry a heavyweight one. Well, you've just, cock blocked 80% of your weather, right? Unless you're in extreme late season, where then a heavier weight, only bringing one heavyweight, because, you're not going to want, personally, I don't want to use some really thick heavyweight beanie, or again, toque, or what are some of the other name, whatever, stocking cap, because I'm going to sweat to death with that. I can get away with a fairly lightweight grid fleece or merino beanie and use that for, even throughout the course of the day, if the weather's in the 40s, right? Or even into the 30s. But if I have a really heavyweight one, I can only really wear that when I'm sitting. I can't hike in it. And I like to hike in a beanie. And so a lot of times I double up. And these are the things that, when it looks at spending money, these don't cost as much as whatever, a puffy jacket or a rain gear. And so, looking at having 2 of these, meaning a moderate to lightweight and a heavier weight, makes a lot more sense, because I might hike in if it's 28 degrees with a 20-mile-an-hour wind with a grid fleece quiver beanie. And when I get there, pull that off and then put in the heavyweight one for sitting and glassing. And what I don't think people realize, the amount of heat lost and gained in your melon, right? It is huge. And so, people say, head cold, body's cold, whatever. So that is huge for me to regulate, because I don't want to go in freezing the entire time, throw a beanie hat on, and then, when I say throw a beanie hat on, warm up for 20 minutes. And after that 20 minutes sit, now I'm cold again. So I like bringing 2 types, a heavyweight and a moderate to lightweight beanie, for once I'm sitting and glassing. The gloves are the same thing, right? I'll carry a lightweight or moderate fingerless on the way in, and then behind the optics, fingers are freezing, I'm going to have a thicker set of gloves when I'm sitting.
Yeah, for me, and this is going to be different for everybody, my feet are notorious for getting cold. And so I put a lot more emphasis and priority on the type of socks and the footwear that I have to make sure that my feet get cold, because, it's never debilitating to where it's just going to ruin my hunt or my backcountry experience, but it does make it more miserable than it really needs to be. So just find out what that thing is for you. Some people, they don't ever have to layer up their legs because they're just, always running hot. So cool. Maybe you can kind of drop, having some extra base layer bottoms instead, and then, you know, use that space and that weight for something else that's going to affect you differently. So the whole key here is just adjustability. Bring with you enough stuff for the environment that you're in, to plan for any sort of contingencies that might happen. And it's nothing crazy. It's not like you're planning for the end of the world. It's like, am I going to get wet? Am I going to get cold? Am I going to sweat my ass off? Cause it's so hot. Like just bring gear based on that and layer it appropriately. And have a little bit of awareness of how your body reacts in those situations, to plan, to make the most appropriate plan.
Yeah. And, you know, while we're talking about this, and we didn't do a great job on the marketing side probably of letting the world know, we have zip off thermals. And, you know, when I say thermals, you know, basically your breeches. We have lightweight and heavyweight merino blend, as well as quiver fleece long underwear. That is huge for me in colder weather, because I don't like wearing those when I'm hiking around. You know, when I say hiking around, when I'm running and gunning, ridge running, moving a lot, I don't like having thermals on, but good Lord, when I stop, I get cold. And so we have non-full zip, but I mean, like, for me, when I ride the horse in, I've got those on. And then the moment I hop off the horse, I don't have to take my boots off. I drop my pants, unzip, take the thermals off, and off I go hiking around. Again, it's really dependent upon the person. And if you, whoever's listening, are like up and down in your temperature, that is something to look at, because, you know, again, you don't want to overheat, but you ride a horse in for 4 hours in cold weather, you're going to wish you had thermals on. If you have to hop off the horse halfway through and go on a stalk, it is nice to be able to take those off. And that is something well for, and I'm not trying to turn this podcast into a total sales pitch. It just fits because we offer those and I use them a lot. I'm the same with you on footwear and socks. You know, like right now, the last hunt I went on, I had I think they call the Shimek from Crispy. They're 400 gram all leather boots. They're insulated. That's about perfect for me in the temperatures that I was, you know, looking at, where I'm never going to wear a 400 gram insulated boot in September. When I say never, you know, what if it snows? Well, if it snows and I knew it, maybe, but I mean, generally that kind of weather in September comes and goes pretty quick, and I'm going to err to the side of my feet, not sweating to death. So again, just knowing what you're up against.
Yeah, solid points, man. So I think we pretty much covered all of the layering system. Now we can probably transition a little bit into kit. I think is probably appropriate on this. So when going out, I think you and I are pretty dialed on the type of things that we make sure that we always carry. And then if we set up a base camp and go scouting, or glassing somewhere else, and we're going to be away from base camp for an extended period of time, there's a certain list of gear that we make sure that we always have on us if we can't make it back to our tent and our base camp. So I would maybe just throw it over to you right now and say, what does that look like? How do you plan your loadout for what you're going to take out with you every single time, and why? And then we'll just let the conversation develop from there.
Okay. And, you know, the way that my pack is set up is I have what's in my actual pack, meaning without the possibles pouch. So I have what's in the pack. Then I have my possibles pouch, which Barclow, if you listen to this, you copied the shit out of me with Uncharted. The don't die pouch, I guess they're selling one of those now. That is totally for me, and I'm fucking with both of those guys, but that's true. So my don't die pouch, my possibles pouch, and that I stole that from Patrick, who Mountain Men used it. That possibles pouch goes with me all the time, and everything in that possibles pouch, it stays the same for the most part. Occasionally I throw a 6-inch flare in there. And so what goes in my pack, what goes in my possibles pouch is how I'm going to kind of cover on this. So what goes in my pack, you know, and I'm going to use this for hunting season, just because I'm going to throw game bags in there. So I'm going to have game bags. And then if I'm not hunting, I'm not going to have those, obviously. The next thing, I carry a contractor bag, at least one, and I'm talking about the full-on fuck you, non-scented, really durable contractor bag. I have one of those with me, and if I could fit it in my possibles pouch, it would be considered part of that, but I don't put it in there.
When you say contractor bag, this is like a 55-gallon drum liner, 3 or 5 mil, right? Some really thick black bags, right?
Black bag, yep. And I have that with me, at least one, and sometimes two, depending upon what I'm doing, all of the time. And that's backpacking in the summer, that's all the time. I'll go into the uses for that, Kurt and I can, in a minute. I have a puffy jacket with me all the time. I have rain gear top and bottom with me all the time. And again, this is in my backpack. Now, after that, depending throughout the course of the day, or depending upon the day, I may have some electrolyte mixed in there. I'm going to have food in there. I'm going to have ass wipe in there. I'm going to have a beanie hat and gloves pretty much all the time. I'm going to have a lightweight beanie hat and gloves. No matter what, again, it could be 90 degrees in July. I'm going to have lightweight hat, lightweight gloves. I'm going to have the contractor bag, puffy jacket, rain gear. Again, no matter what, I'm going to have some electrolyte mix in there, and I'm going to have food with me. After that, it really depends on what we're doing and what's going on, but those are going to be with me all the time. And I'm missing one, a Nalgene bottle. I'm going to have a Nalgene bottle and a bladder, and sometimes both, depending. And then the possibles pouch is going to take much longer to describe. So do you want to take it from here on pack to possibles pouch, and you go over what's in your pack?
Yeah, and again, I bring a lot of my tacit knowledge with the military into how I plan and then how I pack as well. So just like Gatwa, this is really like you touched on it before, we all kind of do that in a way. We just don't give a name or a list or an acronym to it. But because maybe my brain is just more simple, this makes it easier for me to say, okay, here are these steps that I can follow, and then I can constantly reevaluate. I do the same thing with packing gear. You listed out all of the same shit that I bring, but maybe to my brain, it feels a little disorganized, because it's like, oh yeah, I do bring a headlamp, and I have, some trioxane tablets, and maybe you forget something, but for me, I keep it simple because it's just easier for me to remember. And I follow Dave Canterbury's stuff. I've been through his courses a number of times, and I've been through it with some of the units that I've been with as well. He's taught us, but he has mnemonic, and it's the 10 C's of survivability. Of survival, 10 C's of preparedness, and I basically just run through all of that, and it's going to look different for everybody, but I'll just kind of cover down on the first 5, but it's cutting tools, a combustion device, a cover element, a container, and some sort of cordage. So those are the first 5. Everybody's going to have a blade on them, whether that's a bushcraft blade, whether that's a skinning knife, it could be a multi-tool pocket knife, whatever it is. Saw, if you're going to take that out, or some sort of hatchet or something, depending on where you're at. Those are all going to be the things that fall under that. Combustion device, this is basically anything to start a fire. So that's going to be your fire kit right there. Ferro rod lighter, waterproof matches, all of that. Cover is a little bit broad. This could also fall into like your layering system, because that's covering your body, but it also extends upon that and is like your cover elements with regard to a tarp, emergency space blanket, emergency bivy sacks, or anything like that. Your poncho, this could all fall under the cover element. So when I'm planning my stuff out, when I get to the C for cover, I'm also listing out all of my base layer, mid layer, outer layer. That's all going to fall under that for me. And I kind of keep a little bit of a Google Docs or a spreadsheet on what I take with me, because I like to analyze based on hunt to hunt what I took with me, what went well, what I could prefer to take differently, and then I kind of weigh it as well to optimize my training to what I'm taking with me. So after cover is container. That's going to be your Nalgene. It's going to be your canteen cup. It's going to be your stove. Anything that is going to be carrying water purifying boiling water, anything like that, is going to fall under container. And then cordage, rope, paracord. What is the name is escaping me? The tarred bank line. Bank line falls under this. Any fishing line that you want to take with you, some metal wire for traps. All of this kind of falls into that, just based on what you're doing. And it's very flexible. You can tailor it to the scenario that you're going toward. And I find it to be very versatile. So expanding upon that, the next 5 are going to be cotton material, cargo tape. Some people know as duct tape, or compass, handling device, and a canvas needle he has on here as well. But I kind of shift that a little bit, and I'll go over that real quick. So cotton materials is just cotton bandana or rag, some sort of emergency bandage you can use for, pre-filtering water before you, fill up your Sawyer squeeze bladder. You can use that for fire starting, etc. You can use it for first aid. Cargo tape, the same thing is very useful for first aid. You can use it to repair holes in your tent, holes in your tarp. If you get an ember on it from a fire, something like that. Compass, I always take a compass with me, and I'll probably have a few different forms of navigation. I'll have the actual handheld, like Sunto MS2 compass, and then I'll have my watch, and I'll have probably Onyx on my phone, and then I'll probably have a Fortrex or some other form of a GPS that will have a compass on it, whether it's digital or magnetic. Candling device, this is just to keep it a C, because flashlight doesn't start with a C. So this is all your headlamps, strobes, signaling devices, and stuff like that. And then he has canvas needle on here. It's great for gear repair, especially if you're taking, wax canvas tarps or tents, or you have a wall tent or something. If you're an outfitter, it'd be nice to repair that stuff. But honestly, I kind of shifted that to contingency, really. And it's going to, this is where I put in my med kit and everything like that, to make sure that that's as robust as possible. So, my quick breakdown is that I follow the 10 C's of survival. And honestly, before I pack my gear for anything, I'm going through this. Okay, do I have everything that's on here? Because that's going to be basically the minimum amount of stuff that I'm going to want to bring.
And from what Kurt just said, in comparison to like what I'm going to say, it's pretty much the same thing. It's just the way that he lists it. And when I say that, I break mine. We carry the same stuff. I break mine down into 2 categories, and one is what's in my pack, one is what's in my possibles pouch. So, and if you're paying attention with everything Kurt just said, when I shift to what was in my pack to my possibles pouch has, and it deviates, right? Sometimes more or less, or I change things out, but I've got generally waterproof. I say generally, always waterproof, big burn. They're like Zippo giant matches, Bic lighter, and then trioxane or the fire starters that I build. We got a video for that, but I've got ways to build a fire in a miniature ferro rod. I've got a headlamp, generally 2. I've got extra batteries. I've got a compass, and that's either going to be an M9 or a standard like Sunto or Silva handheld compass. I'm going to have in that same possibles pouch is actually my med kit as well, but I'll do the med kit later because I use sutures for a repair kit. But I have a repair kit which is super glue, repairing my air pad, puffy jacket, sleeping bags, whatever I need to repair. I've got the repair kit. I've got a knife in there, and generally it's going to be a standard knife, and I'm also probably going to have, it's either one or the other, some kind of a multi-tool or Swiss Army knife, or both. And it really just depends on what's going on. I'm going to have, and I always have this pill bottle with me, and I don't consider it part of my med kit. And really, this is just semantics or terminology, because I have a separate kit that's a med kit, but the pills that I have on me in this container that's in my possibles pouch are things that I may use throughout the course of the day, and it's always in there. And that could be Benadryl, just in case something happens where I need, I get stung, I don't know, bee, whatever happens. But I'm going to have some kind of painkillers in there, things of that nature, extra set of contacts, glasses, all of the things that I'm going to need throughout the course of the day. MSR Aqua tabs, things that I need to stay the night. Really the only difference from everything Kurt said and I said, I don't always, next to never actually, I don't carry a survival blanket. Honestly, and when I do, I generally am only bringing it to put dead, like meat, deboned meat on the top of it. I don't carry one. And I'm not saying you shouldn't, and I think you should. Sometimes I carry a lightweight tarp, which is kind of the same thing, but different. But Kurt, you always carry some kind of a Mylar reflective blanket in your pack, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of gravitated away from just a straight blanket to more of an emergency bivvy, which essentially acts like that. It's just, it packs down really small as well. It's Mylar lined. It's pretty durable. Like if you had to, you can use it multiple times. It's not going to just shred on you. So I kind of always will make sure that I carry that with me because one, when I'm going out scouting and I'm leaving the majority of my shelter system, I'll at least have that thing that I could crawl into if I have to spend an inconvenient night away from camp and, something to sleep underneath. So that'll typically be a poncho. I'm just trying to keep my gear as tight and versatile, as multifunctional as possible. And that just kind of does it for me with regard to that. But you're absolutely right. I think you touch more on like where you're going to carry this stuff. And for me, I think because I'm kind of a gear nut in regards to that, I'm constantly like T&Eing stuff and I'm checking out other people's packs and I'm trying different things because I'm more comfortable with my skill set and I'm able to do that. I just rely on the military first line, second line, third line gear. So your first line gear is basically everything that's on you, on your person. The second line would be stuff that's on your load-bearing equipment. So it could be stuff that you have in your bino harness or a chest rig that you have or anything like that, a belt pouch, stuff that's like hanging off of you. And then your third line gear is stuff that's in your backpack. So where specifically I put it is going to change. But to your point, like there's certain things I will always have in my bino harness. And honestly, that bino harness is never coming off my body for the entire day until I take it off to get into my rack. In the evening. So there are certain things that I make sure that I put in very specific locations, but oftentimes like it kind of shifts a little bit.
Well, no, and I'm glad you brought that up because that was going to be kind of the next step of with what I put where, meaning what's in my pack, possibles pouch, because the next step is my chest harness. And some of those things double tap because I'm going to have aqua tabs in my possibles pouch as well as my chest harness. And one of the things I don't think I mentioned a second ago, I always carry 1 to 2 different types of cord. So there's in the possibles pouch, it's pretty basic, but we have videos on that for what I have in my possibles pouch. But on my chest rig, whatever that may be, whether it's a bino harness or like a kit bag or what Marsupial sells, like a multi-pack, I'm going to have a Ziploc bag and aqua tabs because I can use that Ziploc bag, even though it's probably not the best for your health, but an emergency situation. If I have to get water, I can use a Ziploc, which compresses extremely small, to procure water and put an aqua tab in there to drink it. I'm going to have a fire starter, meaning like the ones I make or the trioxane tablets. I'm going to have a lighter, backup rangefinder battery when I'm hunting, a headlamp of some sort. Usually it's a micro or very small headlamp. Things like that I'm going to have on me in case I get pinned down, like when I'm on a stalk and then I'm in a survival situation to where I can't get back to my pack in time and a storm has come in, whatever. Yeah. I also keep my inReach on me at all times in my chest rig. It never leaves it because I always have that on me. And so I always have, that as well. And I think everybody, as you kind of write your own book on your system, are going to have slight deviations from what Kurt and I are talking about. But for the most part, everybody I know is pretty much the same of what's in their chest rig, possibles, pouch, and pack. And they might deviate slightly, but it's pretty close. Yeah. And Kurt and I are working on a system right now, like kind of a pack system. When I say pack system, kind of like what's going to go in where. So lumbar pack, kind of an assault pack, chest rig, to where that is, maybe not always applicable to backpack hunting, but you certainly, like you called it, first line, second line, third line, you don't want everything in one place. It just doesn't make sense. You're always going to divvy that stuff up.
Yeah, you wouldn't invest in one stock and put all your money into that. So like, don't put all your gear in one location. Spread it out. Have multiples of certain things. Like I'm always going to have a Bic lighter in my pocket. I'm going to have one in my belt pouch. I'm going to have one in my backpack, in my fire kit. So it's like, spread load these things. It's not like you're only going to carry one way to start a fire. And in that other podcast with Wally, they talk about that exact same thing. They had a very serious scenario where they were stuck on the mountain, couldn't get a fire started. They were trying for an hour with no success. They were completely soaked. All of their wood and their tinder bundles were wet. They had the stuff that you think you would be able to have to get a surefire going. They had cotton balls with Vaseline, everything, and it just, none of it worked. It just started dying out. And Aron kind of brought up a point during that of something that he takes with him all the time in those scenarios, that Wally was like, well, fuck, man, I wish I would have known. But like, that's the whole purpose of a podcast like this. So like, Aron, do you want to talk about like what that one thing is that's like going to almost guarantee that you're going to have something?
Yeah. And I want to make sure, and we talked about this when you listen to the podcast, somebody listening to that last podcast I did with Wally and Ty, I guarantee he's going to listen and be like, I could have got a fire started.
Yeah.
Great. I'm glad. I have been in situations where I could not get a fire started with standard. And when I say standard, Bic lighter or waterproof matches, and then some type of fire starter, where that's cotton balls with, Vaseline or trioxane, because, and maybe, if I looked harder for, the different things I needed to build a fire, I would have eventually got one going. It's just, I couldn't get enough heat source to last long enough to heat up to get something lit and going, to dry off other things, to keep that going and dry that out. And so for a while, in certain situations, and people probably laugh at this, I packed a green fuel canister. Everybody's seen them, the standard ones. You buy them in cases of 12 or independently, and a torch. I just packed like what you heat up hot melt with, a torch. And I carried that in my pack because I knew, and this was for North Idaho, that I wasn't going in multiple miles. So, weight wasn't a big issue, that I could get a fire started. That kind of evolved later on to, I carry flares, and I don't carry a ton of them. I'm either going to carry 1 or 2 6-inch flares, or one of the longer, I think they're 12-inch flares. I carry that with me everywhere when the weather gets bad. No matter what, I have a flare. That thing burns for quite a long period of time, and you still have to do your work. And when I say work, we teach this in the outdoor, the classes that we teach at the academy. You still have to use some common sense when you're gathering the things that you need, but the flare will keep enough of a heat source going for long enough that if you have any kind of skill set in building a fire, you will get one going.
Yeah. And that's kind of what was missing in, I think, a little bit of what the story that they were sharing was. They didn't have something that could extend that fire long enough to get the other shit dry enough to ignite, to allow the other stuff to dry out. It's just like some of those things were just a little too fickle in that scenario, to where they just couldn't get that wet material dried out enough to ignite now. And the flare will definitely give you that time.
Why don't you dive into this is not really covering what we thought. Dive into the fire building portion of this, because if you're building a fire in June, July, August, and September in Wyoming, Colorado, Montana, wherever, New Mexico, Arizona, you're really not good at building a fire, probably, if you're doing it in those states, because you can fart and start a forest fire in a lot of these states because it's easy. Right. And so when I'm talking about building a fire, I talked about that on the podcast with Wally and Ty. I am talking in the worst conditions you can possibly imagine. Like, and you're better at this than I am. Talk about what you need to get that fire going. What are you looking for? And what are the when I say downfalls, like, again, not having enough, to dry things out, but talk about that.
Yeah. And I guess we can go into how you would train for that leading up to it, because you don't want to ever just find yourself in this situation knowing what to do, but have never done it. And it's not like you have to force yourself to stay out in a snowstorm or in a rainstorm and try to start a fire. Like you can have this in a controlled environment that is less than ideal. So an example would be, it's a nice sunny day outside. You have all of your materials gathered from a nice large tinder bundle. You have pencil lead to pencil thick sizes of kindling, and then, graduating up to there to like actual logs, and then just, take a 5-gallon bucket of water and dump it over all of it. And now like try to get it started. So it's like, it's less stressful, but now you're trying to like manage, what you need to do here. One thing for me that I always carry is fat wood. And fat wood is basically just overly saturated pieces of pine that it's a very dark orange color, and if you smell it, it smells like turpentine, but the stuff lights very easily. It's naturally water resistant or waterproof. You can soak a stick of fat wood in a bucket of water, pull it out, and you'll still be able to get shavings off of it and light a fire pretty easily. So something that's often not thought about, I think, in those less than ideal situations is, even if it's been dumping rain for a few days, you can get some larger pieces of material like deadfall, and the outside is going to be soaked, but this is where, batoning and having a saw or some sort of hatchet on you would come into play and be very valuable in these situations. But the outside is going to be wet, but as you start, processing that wood down into smaller pieces, the inside is going to be bone dry. So as long as you can protect yourself from top cover or rain or snow or wind, and keep that stuff dry, you can kind of process down some thicker pieces of wood into something a little bit more manageable, whether it's a feather stick or just like smaller pieces of kindling. And I know you said the flare is very helpful with that. I mean, you can just pretty much hold the flare in some wet pieces of tinder and it'll dry it out and get it going, right? But for me, I'm always going to have some sort of way to collect tinder, and the tinder bundle is kind of the most optimal part of getting a fire started efficiently. And again, this is in mostly ideal situations, but the way I go about it is, if I'm not bringing something in that's going to act as my tinder bundle, I'm going to be like stowing stuff away as I'm coming in. If I see something, a burl on a tree, or some piece of tinder that I find, even a legit bird's nest that I find, I'll stow that away in like a dump pouch and just kind of start collecting pieces. If I run into a river bottom and there's a bunch of birch trees there, I'm going to grab a bunch of flakes of birch bark off the tree and just stash that away in a pocket, because again, that stuff is going to light pretty easily. And I just want to kind of set myself up. I don't have to bring it in. I'm going to collect it when I'm out there. And I'm just always in that like next fire mentality when I'm out in the backcountry.
Let's talk about the next fire mentality. Actually, rewind for just a second. Sure. With what Kurt was just talking about, I think it is important for anybody listening into this to bridge up and down, or terrace up and down, however you want to look at it, of building a fire. So I think everybody should go out and practice building a fire with a Bic lighter and cotton balls with Vaseline in good conditions. Yeah. And then Bic lighter, cotton balls, not great conditions. Ferro rod, I think it's important for people to know how to do that. With less and less technology, meaning a ferro rod, at the very, you should always, if you can start a fire with a ferro rod, whether you ever use that again or not, it takes more skill. So it makes it so much easier to start one with a Bic lighter. It's kind of like shooting long distance in archery. You may not ever take a 100-yard shot, but if you're good at it, 40 is going to be easy. So, and then worse and worse conditions. And I'm a big advocate of this. If you're fishing, if you're scouting, hunting, hiking, and it just starts pissing rain, wait 35, 40 minutes and your hands are cold, go practice building a fire. Like, get comfortable with it. You can do it no matter what, in any condition, with what's in your pack. Because I promise you, the first time you do it, if you've only done it in dry conditions, you're going to suck. It's probably not going to get going, and you're going to know what needs to change in your skill set and also what needs to change in your kit, right? What you might want to do differently. Because there's a lot of, I'm not going to mention any names, but there's certain fire starting systems that they sell on the market that are not that easy to get going. I would say my number 1, 2, and 3 are trioxane, the ones that I build with wax and lighter fluid, and then Canterbury's little fire biscuit things. I would say those. Yeah,
which is essentially what you make yourself.
100%, yes. That's and he just perfected a little. Now, as I say that, there's nothing wrong with cotton ball and Vaseline. That works great. I'm just saying for my top 3, those would be them. And so when I'm talking about this, I'm bouncing all over the place. If you, let's say, carry 3 of the fire starters that I build, which is like one of the cotton makeup little discs with whatever, watch the video, or 1 trioxane tablet, you're going to get a fire started in good conditions. Once the weather gets worse, if you can't get one started, does that mean you bring 2? If your Bic lighter gets wet, you might now bring waterproof matches. If that doesn't work, you might bring a ferro rod. But if you don't, not engulf, but like immerse yourself in these things because you've never been up against the wall, so to speak, with a survival situation, when the rubber hits the road, you're probably going to be all fucked up and not make it happen.
Yeah.
So I can't remember where we started with that, but I can say if you bring a flare that burns for 30 minutes, you can be pretty shitty at building a fire and get one going because those flares burn for 30 minutes. And so that gives you 30 minutes to get wood dried out. And if you did your job, meaning getting, small to big, micro to macro, with the tender bundles and what, you are going to get a fire going in 30 minutes unless you really suck.
Yeah. And honestly, it's probably not a bad thing to have on you anyway, in a very cold weather scenario, because now that can be used for signaling, for emergency recovery. And so it's got more uses than just, blasting a fire. So I think that's a good piece of kit and honestly something that I had not thought about before you brought it up.
Well, where I thought about it is I have a time, like we talked about this in the podcast, as far as like I've been given crap, like Blake picked up my day pack when we were on the sheep hunt. He's like, what do you got in this thing? And I'm like, fuck it, everything I fucking need. There is nothing, like I am not overpacking. I just may be overpacking compared to, other people, but I have what I need. Mm-hmm. So like if I ever hit the button, I'm in deep, deep shit because I do carry what I need. The problem is I have Raynaud's and I lose the feeling in my hands. And so Kurt probably has at least 30 minutes more to an hour of being able to feel his fingers to use a ferro rod to get matches going or whatever. Cause I get to a point I can't feel my fingers, and literally being able to make a fist like a polar bear and then hold the striker in my teeth, I will get a flare going. The other thing too is float tubing. And when I shouldn't say float tubing, rafting, fly fishing in a raft. Like I have flares in my raft for my emergency kit. I have them in my truck, and not just in case something wreck and for traffic, but if I'm ever stuck in a blizzard or anything else, like I have them in my truck for multiple reasons. And then in cold weather, again, in my pack, I carry one. What would you say? We're beating a fucking fire horse to death here. Other than that, what are some of the other very important pieces in your possibles pouch above and beyond fire?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of thinking about fire still, but no, you're right. There's going to be somebody here who's like, oh yeah, just keep talking about this shit. It's interesting. And then, for everybody else, just fast forward to something else that's more interesting. But dude, I know you didn't really cover it, but in my possibles pouch, depending on what I'm doing, I could have my kill kit in there. I'm going to have game bags. I'm going to have, obviously, a headlamp. I'll probably have some snacks because fuel is very important for me. Calories in and calories out. I tend to burn a lot when I'm out in the backcountry, more than I expect. And I'm very bad at making sure that I hydrate, but I definitely make sure that I keep myself fueled. So I'll constantly have additional like goo packets or something like that in there. It's just really, it's going to depend on the situation, like you said. There's no like one game breaking thing that I'm going to have in a possibles pouch that nobody ever thought of. But what I'll make sure is that the stuff that's in there that's overly important is waterproofed appropriately. Like I touched on previously, my feet get cold, so I'll always make sure that I have socks. And this is if I'm going out away from camp. Like this possibles pouch is going to have this stuff in there that's going to make my life a little bit easier when I'm stuck being uncomfortable. Gloves is going to be a big one. Headwear is going to be a big one. It doesn't take up much space, but again, it's like it could be the difference from you like keeping your head together or just getting hypothermia and not being able to keep it together.
Yeah, and I mean those are all good points or things to have. And so with what you talked about, I always have electrolyte mix. Caffeine. I'm a caffeine junkie. I have caffeine, some type of a caffeine, generally a pre-workout of some type in my pack. But
is that where you keep your Copenhagen too in the possibles pouch?
I know, right? It's funny. I don't keep Copenhagen in the possibles pouch.
Gotta start, man.
The thing that for me, I have glasses or contacts extra in my possibles pouch because Blake showed up at my house the other day and I didn't have my glasses on. Now keep in mind, I've hung out with Blake on the mountain of town. That's the outfitter. Blake is 3 feet back from my bottom step, and I open my door and I'm like, and it's early, and I'm like, can I help you? Like a dick, right? And Blake's like, it's Blake. And I couldn't see him, right? I did not know it was him. My vision is that bad without my glasses on. So I always have glasses or contacts, a backup set. The fire building, we covered that. I have that. I always have MSR Aqua tabs. No matter what, I have those with me. And you can go a while before you can drink bad water for a bit before Giardia kicks in. It's usually like 7 to 10 days, I think, or whatever. But I have, the Aqua tabs with me. I have caffeine. I have to have caffeine throughout I don't have to. I really like caffeine throughout the course of the day at some point. So everybody's going to be different. You may not have caffeine with you, right? You may have the greatest vision, but you really need to assess when you're packing your system or figuring out your system, what is most important to you for creature comforts and what is most important to you for survival. Because if I don't have contacts or glasses and I rub one out, something happens with my eyes and I have to hike out, I am so fucked if I'm doing it with nothing because I can't see 6 feet away from me. So, I mean, would I make it? Probably. Would I be happy about it? Definitely not. So everyone's just going to change a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't, we're at an hour and a half. I think the only thing that I wanted to cover that we haven't hit was, and you and I could talk about this all day. When do you shelter in place? When do you when do you make the choice to stay the night in comparison to trying to get back to your truck, base camp, bivvy camp, or whatever? And Kurt, if I'm forgetting shit, dive in. But this is one I wanted to cover because this was asked a lot. When do I choose, or when would you choose to stay the night in comparison to getting back to your nice tent with your sleeping bag? And why would you make those decisions? And a lot of this really has to do with what is in your pack. And so when I talk about this, I'm going to discuss what's in my pack, that helps make this decision easier for me if I have to stay the night. But go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of this is going to lean on who you're with as well, and their level of skill and whether they're just maxed out or not. So for me, maybe I'll just cover what I always carry with me. And again, this is really just going to fall back on my simplistic method of the 10 C's of preparedness or survival. I need to make sure that I have something to sleep on, something to sleep under, and something to sleep in. That's where that emergency bivvy comes into play. That's where my poncho comes into play. I can always, throw that up in an A-frame or a lean-to or something like that. So as long as I can control my body's core temperature while I'm out, I have no problem spending time away from camp if that's what needs to happen. Now, if I can get a fire going, like that's going to be a priority there. If it gets to the point where like I'm just maxed out, maybe my headlamp shit the bed and I don't have spare batteries on me because I lost my head and I didn't bring them with me. Like all of these things are going to come into play with why I would make that decision. I'm going to always prefer to get back to camp, but sometimes you get to a point where you've just kind of like scouted your way too far away from camp, and it's going to be just more beneficial for you to shelter in place than it would be to try and hike the 6 miles back to camp at night in very dangerous terrain where you could risk injury to yourself or the people that you're with. And you just kind of, maybe you don't even get sleep. You just build a giant, what Aaron Snyder calls white man fire. And you guys are just awake around this thing all night. So it just depends, but there's going to be things that I always bring with me to make sure that I'm comfortable. And it's going to depend on the situation with who I'm with and what the environmentals are of that.
No, I agree. And so like what I look at as far as, whatever, sheltering in place, stopping to make a shelter is, Kurt just said it, how much gas do I have in the tank, or does my, client or buddy have in the tank? That's one. How much juice do we have left in the headlamp, right? How much battery life is left, and how much do we have extra batteries, and what we're looking at going through, and illumination. And people don't talk about, and this is huge in Kurt's former world, you have 20% illumination. Yeah, I'm money. I can make it through anything with 20% illumination. Yeah. But that does not happen very often, right? So when I say 20%, and Kurt, dive into that before I keep going, full moon, 20% illumination, what does that mean in layman's terms for, for maneuvering in, at midnight with a full moon?
Yeah. And again, I don't even know if we should get into this because it's going to be very situational based on moonrise, moonset. Lunar angle is going to be another one. It could be a full moon, but if you're on the side of a mountain where that moonlight is blocked, like it doesn't fucking matter.
I guess triple canopy, double canopy forest has a lot to do with it as well. Yeah.
Right. Just being on, it's the same as like during daylight. If you're on the shaded side of a mountain during full daylight, like it doesn't matter how bright the sun is, you're going to be cold because you're just in the shade the whole time. The same thing applies with moonlight. You could be shaded, and that 20% illume that could be baller if you're out in the desert doesn't really help you at all in that scenario. So these are kind of like a little bit more advanced things, and I don't know that most people would even factor that stuff in. They would be like, if I don't have a headlamp, I'm just not going to be able to navigate at night.
Let's just put ourselves in a normal scenario. We are 3 miles from our tents, our shelters. We're 3 miles from our shelters, and it's getting dark, or dark. We have got an elk down on the ground. We've cut it up, or we're getting close, right? It's almost done, and we're looking at packing that elk back to our tents through the night, right? Well, if I have a contractor bag and I haven't used it on the elk, game bags are hanging. I have I have what I need to build a fire. The temperatures aren't extreme, like cold, like not crazy cold. And I have trees around me, good cover, and the weather's not bad, I am throwing a hell of a sales pitch to my partner, Kurt, of fuck that. I don't want to hike back to camp to turn around and hike back. Let's sleep here and head out in the morning. Pack it out back in the morning, because Kurt and I have everything we need to have a relatively comfortable night. And I think at the last course, Kurt, where you had pitched your hammock, I was explaining to everyone, I'm like, you know what I see there? I see an amazing night's sleep with next to nothing, because there was probably 12 inches of pine cone duff or whatever, where you've got like a really squishy bed. You had great overhead cover of, tree branches and pine boughs or whatever, where you had good cover in a fairly decent pocket up against a hill, where you could stay in place for the night with a puffy jacket, rain gear, and your garbage bag over your bottom section, and be pretty damn happy. Like, you may not be in the Ritz, but when I look at this, when I'm like assessing if I'm going to like stay in place throughout the night, if we're hiking back and we're still a couple miles from camp, everybody's dog tired, one guy's just laying up on you, my headlamp batteries ran out. What I'm looking at that point, if headlamps battery have run out, illumination is low to zero, I have to shelter in place. I don't have a choice, because you're putting yourself and everyone else at bigger risk trying to hike through the dark, potentially getting lost, or you know what I mean, confused a bit on your route. And so that's something. The other one is too, if I'm lost and I'm confused and I don't really know if I'm going the right way, that doesn't happen very often with me, but that is a realistic thing to assess. If you've got a place with firewood, you can tuck into a little cubby hole. You've got good firewood. The weather isn't horrible. You can get a fire going. You have a tarp or some kind of a shelter. You've got rain gear. You're probably better off to stay there till the sun comes up, because you're going to fuck yourself up even worse wandering in the wrong direction. So a lot of those things are what I look at. Yeah.
I think you do a really good job of like framing that out.
You know why? Listener. Because I've done every fucking one of them. Yeah. I've screwed up every possible way, known to man. But having said that, I know what Kurt has in his pack, and I know what Kurt's skill set is, same as Wally. There is the option of, if you have headlamps, to just sucking it up and hiking through the night. There's just a level of like, okay, how many cliffs are we going to have to go down? Is it worth putting ourselves in jeopardy going through cliffs to try to get back to camp when we could have a relatively decent to moderately uncomfortable night just sleeping, where we're at? Those are all the things I look at. So the only time that really, the big things you have to look at, not the only time, the big things you have to look at, weather. If you sheltering in place and you're in an ice or a snowstorm and you don't have the ability to get a decent little, shelter going, a cliff overhang, whatever else, and you can't get a fire going, movement is life. You're almost better to keep moving to stay warm with the headlamp on. And so it's different every time. And I'm probably confusing people talking too much, but...
You probably are.
Yeah.
I would imagine most people listening to this for an hour and 30 minutes are probably like getting zoned out by now.
Potentially. Yeah. And I mean, as long as everybody kind of takes the meat and potatoes off this podcast, I think that's the most important thing. But I would definitely suggest listening to us on the packing list. The layering system's huge, paying attention to that and kind of starting to write your own book of what works best for you, and then and applying those things as you're writing that book, so to speak, with what's in your pack and your own basic system or whatever. But that doesn't work unless you're trying those things out. So that's a big part of it, obviously.
No. Perfect.
Here. All right. Yeah, we hit an hour and 35 minutes. You got anything else you want to add? All right, everybody. Kurt and I've kind of went all four points to the compass as far as survival and staying in place, and 5 points and everything else. But the biggest thing with this is, meat and potatoes of what we've talked about. Make sure you trial your gear in different conditions. Make sure you're confident with all of those things. Make sure, hats off to Lance Banning, you're assessing in every situation you're in. And we do teach these courses, right? We do kind of immerse you into the situations you might be put in the academy courses. So if you're looking at potentially buying more gear, try not to make this a sales pitch, you might want to put that money rather into more gear, into actually getting a class for higher learning of using the gear that you already have, and really kind of immersing yourself in that. And the academy courses do that. Kurt, do you want to dive into the academy course at all, or touch on that, like what we offer real quick before we hop off this thing?
Yeah, we're going to look to hold about 6 academy courses spread out somewhere between late spring all the way up into probably around August. And they're going to focus on everything from basic field craft skills, land navigation, spot and stalk, tactics, techniques, and procedures. And we may even dive into basic marksmanship with regard to archery and rifle as well. But it's going to lean heavily on situations that you're going to encounter going on a backcountry hunt. But it's not going to be so isolated that if you don't do backcountry hunting, you won't get anything out of it. We've had people in the courses this past year who have come who haven't done much hunting, or who are wanting to get information on something that they may do in the future. So it's going to be a lot of very good information, and we'll have different levels based on your experience level, beginner, intermediate, advanced, and we can go on from there. But keep an eye out on basically Aron's social media on Born Primitive Outdoor, and we will be throwing out some course dates with the levels of proficiency required for that course, and especially like what that course is going to entail. I think that's pretty much covers most of it.
No, for sure. So again, with the courses, you can get a hold of me, get a hold of Kurt. You can ask whatever, we'll answer whatever question you have on what course fits for you. If you have questions on gear, things of that nature, get a hold of me anytime. But we do really appreciate the support. We're growing at a very rapid pace, and we really love, obviously, we look at our customers as family more than anything. And the Academy definitely brings that family into an even tighter niche kind of a unit, which is great, right? We love that, and we love that about Born Primitive. So thanks for all the support. Thanks for tuning in. If you have any questions, feel free to get a hold of me anytime. And Kurt, thank you for hopping on the podcast again.
Man, thank you, bro.
Make sure and check out Sheep Feet for their 25% off November sale. Type in BPO. The guys over at Sheep Feet, Caleb, are awesome. So check them out. And thanks for tuning in, everybody.